welcome to Who Review Episode 3, The Giggle. We did it, Chris, we made it. All three specials, which felt like they'd never air, have now aired. Ncuti Gatwa is now officially the Doctor. How are we feeling?
I feel, in terms of that, how pleased were you to finally hear him say, "Can somebody tell me what the hell is going on here?" And it just be like, okay, cool. We never need to see that in a trailer again. Lovely. Good.
Yeah. My relief wasn't based on I don't have to ever see it again. My relief was just based on now I don't have to eternally ponder the location of that scene again. Because the big question for those who don't know, that scene was in the trailer, and Russell made it very clear that the background was a sort of like a holding, a holding slide almost, like to hide the real location. And I think the eternal pondering that followed that was strong.
But what annoyed me about that is, he actually said something like, "You'll never see that shot again." It was just in there because of that. But that's what he said about the teaser at the end of The Power of the Doctor or something, I think. So then it just became, but then that shot appeared in every single trailer.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet the marketing department were just like, that's the best shot we have of Ncuti that they'll let us use. So I think they probably overrode him there. But anyway, we've seen The Giggle. It's a complicated fucking thing, this, isn't it, where we are with this? Because if we're doing overall thoughts, Chris, it's a beautiful, complicated, nonsense mess of an episode, and I don't 100% know how I feel about it. I've watched it twice now, and I've got very mixed feelings about almost every element of this episode. So this is going to be quite hard to review, I think. We can probably do what we've done on the previous ones and just talk about all the stuff we liked first, and then talk about stuff that we weren't sure worked. But if we're doing overriding thoughts, I think this is an episode full of 100,000 good ideas, but no time at all to explore any of them properly. And that's an exercise in frustration, I think, because it probably could have been simpler. That's my overriding thought. Is it a great episode of Doctor Who? I don't think it is. Is there a bunch of really great stuff in it? Yes. Did I enjoy my experience watching it? Yes, very much. But I think it will not hold up to the test of time the way that maybe the 50th anniversary special does, where that still just works as a complete story of its own that you really feel satisfied with. I feel like this ended up feeling like a weird bridge between two eras of the show that didn't really feel like it did more than that. I don't know. It's a difficult experience to describe this. I can't remember who it was, but someone on Twitter, and I'm sorry for whoever it was who said this. It might have been the Ponderer, but basically said this is like Series 4 if it was just Partners in Crime, Midnight, and what's the last episode called again?
Journey's End.
Journey's End. And I'm like, that's exactly what this is. That is exactly what this is. Like a really truncated season's worth of television.
I think that was Mr. TARDIS. But I think that was Mr. TARDIS.
It might have been Mr. TARDIS. I saw it on Twitter. I didn't make note of who it was. So yeah, I really agreed with that. It really hit me as an accurate description of how I was feeling about this whole experience. So yeah, that's where I'm at overall. How are you feeling overall about all this, Chris? Before we get into the nitty gritties.
I think it's one of those classic Doctor Who things where there's a lot of, and it's probably, when I'm sort of randomly scrolling or whatever, I will probably watch clips from this episode more than the other two, because, in particular that, from the second Ncuti appears, it's a riot, and I will watch a lot of that stuff, minus maybe the garden stuff. Again, so there were moments in the episode that I think I'm drawn to, but I think when you think about the fact that 20 minutes into this episode, we're doing the spooky dolls stuff with Donna in that room, but that doesn't really go anywhere and could easily be taken out. And when you think about the fact that the opening scene is this apocalyptic, the world's against each other, but then that doesn't really go anywhere, and we don't explore that anymore. That's literally like the threat, but then it doesn't really feel like a threat. The threat then becomes just the toy maker and the Doctor playing a game. So you go, well, maybe there was a cleaner way to get to that. The fact that it's, there's so much discussion. It's a little bit end game in terms of the interpretations. And in a world where that a lot of that there's going to be a lot of questions about obviously we're going spoilers right away, about bi-regeneration, you sort of go, well, why don't you make more effort to answer those in the show then?
I'm going to clarify.
This is going to be a thing.
I'm going to clarify now. It's bi-generation. I think people have been referring to it as bi-regeneration, but it's bi-generation. Bi replaces re.
Right.
I'm just going to say that now because I was making the same mistake for quite some time because this leaked, like this notion leaked a while back, and we weren't 100% sure it was legit. Until more recently, when other things from that leak sort of started to become true, it sort of became kind of clear. But yeah, the bi-generation stuff leaked early. I tried to keep an open mind about what that might mean because obviously it doesn't sound great. And I was like, let's see how it's executed. The answer is not great, but we'll come back to that. So I just want to clarify now because I was also calling it bi-regeneration, but it's bi-generation.
Yeah, fair enough. So none of those sort of questions are asked within the. That sounded really like stern. Yep, fair enough. I was just moving. Yeah, fair enough. I will try and fail to get that pronunciation right. So I enjoyed it. Like I had a good time, and I thought a lot of it. Like you say, there's a lot of great ideas in there. I think I will go back to it a lot, and I will think about it a lot. That's how I felt about the episode. Overall, I'm really torn because I in a way, I almost don't know why these were held on to for so long because I don't know how much I feel like these. It feels like a finale to New Who more than it does the 60th specials, and there are a lot of name checks, and we got a lot of deep cut name checks, and I think actually as a whole, if you include it all going on iPlayer, if you include it, if you include Tales of the TARDIS, it feels incredibly celebratory, and I think in a good way. And I think Russell T Davies I sort of scanned the commentary. And, he talks about there's no need for everything to be multi-Doctor. But I don't know, I like multi-Doctor. I'm okay with that, I think. And I don't, we talked before last week about how the power of the Doctor, had all of that stuff and maybe wasn't that great. And I still stand by that. But equally, I don't know, this feels like Series 4.2, and it feels like a sort of mini series, and I just think, so I don't know how a great mini series and very enjoyable, but I don't know if it's necessarily if I'm being honest, what I personally, and it's a very personal criticism, so I'm not actually criticizing the show necessarily. I'm just talking about my personal opinion. Is this what I would have chosen for the 60th anniversary? Probably not, in terms of celebrating the whole show. Shooty is wonderful, and I cannot wait to see more and get to that, because he was phenomenal, and that's so exciting.
On that point about this isn't what you would have chosen... let me, because I agree, not what I would have chosen either. But at the same time, there's a part of me that goes, well, but what I would have chosen might have been the predictable thing. A multi-Doctor story was what they did last time there was an anniversary. Maybe that's not the idea. Do you think if these episodes had been better or cleaner, maybe a little... Because this feels like there's like 8 episodes of ideas in 3 episodes, is how this feels to me, looking back at it as a whole. Now I've got all 3. Do you think if it had been cleaner, executed a bit smoother, that you'd still feel that way? Or if the episode's quality had been so much higher that you'd have just gone, well, it doesn't even matter if it doesn't feel like an anniversary, it was so good Like, and that's what we wanted, quality Doctor Who. Do you think quality could have overridden that feeling regardless of the content, is what I'm asking, I guess?
Yes. Yeah, I do feel that. And I feel like they did, in some senses, they did cock up a little bit with some of the marketing. I rewatched the trailer this morning that announced the episode titles, and I'm sorry, and I think we touched upon this last week. We didn't go in too deeply to it. They got it wrong with Wild Blue Yonder, because you could not say much about the episode. You could not put much in the trailer about the episode. You could just do that, but by doing things like in the title announcement clip trailer, when Wild Blue Yonder comes up, there's all those graphics on screen, and it says redacted, redacted. You did it to yourselves. Like, you just don't put. There are other clips from Wild Blue Yonder in that trailer. Just put one of those there,
I've
and
forgotten
make it,
they'd
and
done
just
all that.
and just. Yeah, and just don't say too much. Just don't draw attention to the fact that we don't know that much about Special 2. So I think there's some elements in which they kind of got it wrong with the marketing as well, and I think Wild Blue Yonder is one of them, because then the other reason it kind of, you're like, oh, 60th stuff, is because Wild Blue Yonder, the way they talked about it, made everyone think it was going to be that. And it didn't really matter because Wild Blue Yonder was so good. But I think, I agree with you. I think if they'd have been just absolutely knock out the park, stunning episodes, then I'd be like, they did something different for this year's anniversary. Cool.
Yeah. And I think looking back at it as a whole, I still think I'm positive on all three of these episodes.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
But I don't think any of them are Russell's best. Or the best representations of what this show has to offer. I think Star Beast is a really good, like, baseline episode of Doctor Who that's like kind of fun and goofy, but sort of just exists to get the pieces in motion. I think Wild Blue Yonder is probably the best of the three. It is a really good example of what Doctor Who can do, and it just like has a really simple focus. And that's why I think it's the strongest of the three. And then I think, I really do think that Giggle suffers a little bit from end of time syndrome, where it's like it's just too much going on and it can't keep track of any of it or do anything interesting with any of it, because for some reason, and I talked about this last week actually before we even saw the Giggle, Russell has a habit of overstuffing his finales with ideas that he then doesn't get to do anything interesting with, and therefore it becomes frustrating. And I've talked about not having a great history. In terms of my enjoyment of the episodes, I think once the excitement of Shooty dies down in the cold, hard light of day, I think the Giggle is the weakest of the three, probably, as just a piece of television. But it's elevated right now above, I think, the Star Beast on the grounds of really exciting to see Shooty. It's really did a great job getting me excited for the next era of the show. And I think, obviously, Neil Patrick Harris is just spellbinding in the role of the Toymaker. So it's frustrating because I don't think this is what it could have been. I do think this could have been better. I mean, and look, and I don't want to be the guy that's like, this is how I would have done it. But like, the answer is just less. Just do less. Like, don't bother with the idea that humanity's fighting itself. Save that for an episode. That's a great idea for an episode of Doctor Who, where you can really get into the nitty-gritty of what that means. If everyone on the Earth thought they were right, what actually would the implications of that be? Not just 3 or 4 throwaway lines, then going off on an adventure. This episode should have started with the Doctor just getting pulled straight into the Toymaker's realm. You released me during Wild Blue Yonder, and now I'm fucking here for a rematch. And then we just do a bunch of exploring the Doctor as a character as he goes toe-to-toe with the Toymaker in games, and more involved games, because as fun as it is that the two games are actually the simplest games of all time, right? There's nothing to them, therefore there's no tension to them. I think the Doctor should have been put through games that force the Doctor to reconcile with their character arc, which is this idea that they're burnt out. And maybe the reason the Doctor loses the game in the middle is because they're burnt out. And then we could do some character work alongside the science fiction, which is what we did so well last week with Wild Blue Yonder. I just think focusing on that stuff and the Doctor versus the Toymaker would have been the superior way to do this, rather than throwing in Unit and Kate Lethbridge Stewart and the Stooky Bill and the origins of television and the Giggle that makes everyone think they're right. and the fact that Trinity Wells, who I was very excited to see, but Trinity Wells has become a fucking fucking Tucker Carlson style news host. Like, there's just so much going on, and that's not even touching on Mel returning, and like, Christ, it's just so much. It's too much. The episode cannot handle even a fraction of it well. It's so
for me, it's
overwhelmed.
For me, it's the dull stuff, because that's so tonally different to everything else as well. That's to be honest with you, the kind of the spooky, slow build horror of Wild Blue Yonder. Like, so for me, it's the dull, because I like stuff. I'm a bit of an easy to please fanboy when it comes to like, cool, it's set in Unit, great. I love Shirley, I loved Mel being back. Like, you know what I mean? I don't disagree with your point about their detriments to the episode. I do agree with that. But in terms of what shit bothered me, that didn't bother me so much. But yeah, I just found the dull stuff a bit, because like Jess really reacted to the dull stuff.
Yeah, it's creepy.
She thought that was so creepy and intense, but it's not the whole episode. That's pretty much parked like halfway through and stuff. And yeah, it's a very bizarrely paced episode. And like I say, still one I enjoyed, but it is interesting because I think, like you say, once you take out Shooty and Neil Patrick Harris, you are then left with a bunch of stuff that's like, not sure how well this fits together.
Yeah, it's way too many ideas. And none of them I think the other big issue really is just none of them really explored. That is the issue, if I'm being honest. And I don't even mind, because some people are going to talk about like the Vinx or the Vlinx, whatever it's called, and the Z-Dex and all that stuff. And I was just like, oh no, I kind of like that Unit's just got weird shit going on that's not explained.
Yes, yeah,
like,
I agree.
Somebody would, I think somebody paying maybe less attention would, in their arguments about this episode's story not coming together, cite something like the Vlinx as part of that. And I think, no, the Vlinx is designed to not be part of this story. It's just a detail, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that kind of world building, where it's like, we're not going to address it, we're not going to talk about it, it's not the point, But when you put an idea in, like the Giggle, and like this idea that everyone on the Earth thinks they're right, which is, again, a fascinating Doctor Who idea, or the doll stuff with Stooky Bill, also a really fascinating, spooky, potential for a 45-minute Doctor Who episode. It's sort of somewhere between what we got last week with Wild Blue Yonder and what was that old one with the TV where the lady was in the TV and she was sucking people into the TV and they're losing their faces? What was that one? I always forget that name of that episode.
Yeah, very unpopular episode. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called either. But yeah, so
this is series 2.
It's creepy and it's good, and it's like this is too good an idea to be wasting here, where actually the focus needs to be on the Doctor and the Toymaker.
Especially because of how close it is to the real, like, that doll exists, and if you look at the pictures, it's like, oh god, that's creepy. Like, that was one of the creepiest elements, looking it up and going, oh god, this is based in truth.
Yeah, 100%. Creepy as hell. Absolutely creepy as hell. Let's talk about some of the details then. Let's get into some of the bits and bobs.
The idiot's lantern.
Idiot's lantern. Thank you. Yes.
Can I jump on that point actually? Because it's also, though, it kind of feels like
Archangel.
There are points of this where
Oh, I thought you were going to say as well that it felt the idea of the Giggle getting into people's head with that music feels very Archangel Network, feels very how the Master got into everyone's heads in season 3.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, that isn't what I was going to say, but yeah, no, that is very true. I was going to say that, like, some parts of this, like, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, I think some precedents have been set in recent Doctor Who that he could have exploited. So, for example, in terms of stuff just being there, Mel being there because we saw Kate offer all the companions, like, we saw Mel being offered the job. So her being there and just being there, and that initial reaction of David Tennant of 14 being like, oh god, it's you, this is the best news ever, having a big hug, lovely, cool. But then we've got this whole sort of mini Mel backstory, and I'm like, no, you don't need that. We have set up the in-world explanation for why Mel is there. We don't need to almost like it was just that second moment where they're having a chat and she's talking about where she's been and what she's done, where I'm like, you feel like you need to put this in because, you know, we did it so well with Sarah Jane and stuff, but it's like, but we haven't got the time here. No. And so it just makes it feel like overstuffed again. And look. Sorry, I'm on a roll. I loved Spice Up Your Life. Great Neil Patrick Harris moment. Great scene. Great visuals. Very echoing, I think, of the James Gunn Suicide Squad. But okay, fine, you know, sci-fi, whatever.
Well, I mean, it's also. I mean, Doctor Who's had a long history of doing a big villain song. Like we've got. You know, Sound of Drums from season 3, and then Rah Rah Rasputin just 2 episodes ago.
Well, that's exactly the point I was building to. I meant visually, the visuals of bullets turning into other stuff is very similar to James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Yes.
But this is the thing. Exactly what you've just said. I loved all that, but we just had Rasputin 2 episodes ago, and Russell at the very least has seen that script at this point. And it just feels like, well, you know, I had the Master Dance, and wouldn't it be great to utilise Neil Patrick Harris's skills? Like, yeah, it would, but we saw that 2 episodes ago. Like, why do we need to be devoting time to that? Like, when we saw it, it was great, but we saw it 2 episodes ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, but on the Mel point, I would say the Mel one's difficult because Mel was not Sarah Jane in how she was left. Sarah Jane was left on Earth, contemporary Earth, and all you have to do is figure out how she got from, I think he dropped her off in Scotland instead of London or whatever. She has to just make a joke about, you left me in Scotland, I had to hitchhike back, and that's, you've done it. Mel was like traveling through space. With a, you know, how Mel is back on Earth is a much bigger question, if I'm being honest. And I feel like if you are a classic Who fan, you do need the answer to that question. I think if you watch those episodes and you committed to that, and you're a fan of the character of Melanie. You want 2 things from this episode. You want them to finally end the meme of her being a computer programmer that never computer programs. Ever in the history of the show. In her first episode, she's a computer programmer. Never again came up. Not once. So it's a long-running joke about the Mel character that so she gets to do that in this episode. Tick. And then the other thing you do I think if you're bringing Mel back, you do have to explain how she got home. And they did it in a very casual way. They did it in the quickest possible way they could. I got a lift on she named some space thing, and he's like, "What's that?" She's like, "It's a thing you get a lift off." Like they covered it. You know, she even explained where the guy that she went off with, where he ended up. You know, so they covered it. But I do think you're kind of trapped if you're bringing Mel back to explain that, more so than you ever were with a character like Sarah Jane, who was, you know, on Earth in reasonably contemporary times, if memory serves. I don't remember she was. I don't think she was brought back out of time or anything. So Sarah Jane was easier to justify by quite some way, I think. But that's that's just that completionist in my head, though, and I feel like a lot of fans would have felt that way if they were familiar with Mel's story. They would have been like, "Well, wait a minute, what's the deal? Like, how did she get back to Earth?"
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's probably a question people had when they saw her in the Centenary, you know, in Power of the Doctor, but you know, she didn't get a chance. I
think when there's so many unanswered questions about bi-generation, though, do you know what I mean? Like the episode, right. If they'd missed that out, the episode is not answering a lot of other things.
Well, let's save bi-generation because I think that's a big discussion. Let's talk about the rest of the episode. You know, pluses and minuses, just individually, and then we'll get to bi-generation because I think bi-generation is going to be quite a large discussion. So I really liked. A lot of the toy makers' observations about humanity. I thought that was really fun, and I know you only get that storyline if you're doing the whole Giggle, everyone thinks they're right thing, but I did like that. I couldn't decide how I felt about the idea the salt thing from the previous episode is what allowed the toy maker to return, because I just don't think that really tracks, if I'm being honest. I was willing to just go along with it, as I did with much of this episode. But if you think about that even slightly, it doesn't really work. if I'm being honest. He played a game at the edge of the universe, and then he let him in? Okay. Sure, I guess. Strange. Obviously, the Spice Up Your Life sequence is one of my favourite things from the entire episode. I'm just quickly skimming through my notes just to mention anything I liked. One thing I didn't like, I thought the games were too simple. I think I might have hinted at this earlier, but if you're going to do the Doctor going up against the Toymaker, considering the last game, the Toymaker and the Doctor played a game for days and days, like the idea that these were just too quick, like throw a ball a bit, open a deck of cards a bit, split, cut the deck. Like, I know that was kind of the point he was going for, to keep it simple, but cut a bunch of other stuff and make those games more interesting by quite some way, please. That was a problem for me. Let's have a look very quickly. Anything else I want to touch upon notes-wise? Oh, I like that Donna was offered a job, running the running theme of just everyone being offered a job. If you've been with the Doctor, you can. I really loved all of the Donna, and actually we should talk about this in more detail. All of the Doctor and Donna's discussions this week were really good. When she says to him, "You just keep charging on. Look at us now. We haven't stopped." Like, since the minute he met her in the Star Beast, everything has just run one story into the next. And the one thing I will say about the pacing of this episode is, as much as I didn't care for it and wished it was a bit more methodical and a bit slower and a bit more like just focused on the Doctor and the Toymaker, one thing about having all these ideas shoved in the episode, and I don't know if this is intentional, but you do feel like you've been run ragged watching it. Like, that exhaustion that they're talking about that the Doctor must be feeling because he's running from one story to the next. That's how I felt watching this. If I'm being honest with you. I don't know. How did you feel about that, Chris?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think especially if you watch all three together, that will really come across. And they definitely did a great job across all of it of building this sort of said tension within the Doctor of needing a rest. It's like the character just feels exhausted, and you just go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, and I almost think to some degree, Shooty linking it back to like the whole show, the whole 60 years, is almost a bit like, well, now we're suggesting that literally it would take millions of years for him to, do you know what I mean? He's hanging out with the Nobles, with Donna Noble's great grandchild, like still trying to work through this shit.
Yeah. I don't know if it's maybe him and Busted, just in the year 3000.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know if maybe like just focusing on recent events would have been a bit cleaner. And again, it feels like, oh, well, if we make it about more, we can chuck in all these references to all the 60 years and make it, here we go. It's not a multi-Doctor episode, but we name-checked Adric. Yeah, okay, cool. But Adric got name-checked 2 episodes ago as well.
Yeah, I will say with that, I kind of thought it was more about, like, Russell had the idea that he would link it back to the Toymaker. Because the Toymaker's a first Doctor adventure, this idea that we've been running since the first time we fought the bloody Toymaker was like, I think that's why he jumped on that. I don't think it was necessarily because he wanted the excuse to make all those references, although that's fun too. I just think he liked the idea that it sort of almost feels like it started and ended with the Toymaker. And I know the Toymaker wasn't the first thing William Hartnell's Doctor came up against, but it made for a really good, clean point from 15, when he was like, you've been running since the first time you fought this guy. Like, it's a long time.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the notion. Whether that worked or not, I'm not so sure. If anyone would like to know, I made note of all of the things it's referenced. Put on trial of a Time Lord. Exiled, that's obviously what happens to the third Doctor, John Pertwee. He gets exiled. The Time Key, which is from the first Doctor. Adric, which is a Peter Davidson's fifth Doctor. Devastation at Logopolis, that's the fourth Doctor. Obviously, River Song, Sarah Jane, Rose, The Time War, Pandorica. These are all things from New Who. Well, Sarah Jane, obviously, from Classic, but showed up. Mavic Chen was the Guardian of the Solar System from the Dalek Master Plan. That was a hell of a pull. And then the one that I thought was the absolute, like, most out of the fucking nowhere. And Shooty's Doctor really put some emphasis on this one. We fought the gods of Ragnarok, and we never stopped to say that's not okay. And I'm like, are you referring to the greatest show in the galaxy? The Seventh Doctor story that I think pretty much no one remembers? What a fucking pull!
Well, because I reckon that, especially the toy makers, my legions are coming, or whatever he says. I reckon Russell's doing more gods in the next series.
Yes,
I think that's what that is.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
If we want, we can talk about that, because I wrote the quote down, actually. Where is that? I wrote that down.
Oh, does he confirm that in the commentary or something?
No, I wrote the quote down from... There's something that the toy maker says, but I have lost it.
Oh, are you talking about the only one he wouldn't fight thing? Because
yes.
I didn't like that. I didn't like that. It just felt like Bad Wolf again. It just, because clearly the Meep saying the boss.
Yes.
And you know what
I've
also?
got the quote.
You know what also?
Very quickly before you go, the quote is I went and fought all of your greatest enemies, blah blah blah, the master in my tooth, all that stuff, and then he goes, except one, the one who waits. I saw it hiding and I ran. I think this is supposed to be the same thing that the Beep was referencing as well, the boss. I think it's the same entity.
Yeah, same. But I just don't know, it just feels... okay, actually, I'll tell you that, because I'm trying to... I'll tell you what specifically annoys me, actually. Because it's probably not the right thing to be annoyed about. Because there is an element of where it just feels like it's basically the same form of building as Bad Wolf, just mentioning something. You know what really annoys me, Dan? Him saying the one who waits is in the trailer. And I'm like, don't put a fucking tease for the future in the trailer and make it seem like
in the trailer?
Yep, because it makes it seem like the toy maker is the one who waits, and that annoys me.
That's hilarious. I didn't realise that was in the trailer. I've not gone back and watched the trailer since I've seen these 3 episodes, but it sounds like that trailer is a bit of a mess.
Well, it's all right. It's a different. The redacted things in a different trailer, but I knew that because I thought, ooh, I really liked when I saw that in the trailer before watching the episode. I liked the notion of the Toy Master's been waiting fucking years, and so then when Neil Patrick Harris says it, I'm like, oh fuck it, great. It's not even about him, and I don't know, but more God stuff.
Yeah, I think they're going to do a lot of that. I think we're going to get a lot of that. I think there's going to be gods, and I think maybe we're coming to Omega and Resilion and these Time Lord gods. This stuff. I think we're coming to that. Very quickly, a couple of other quick notes before we get on to By Generation. I really liked the line, "All the laws I cling to gone," when he first is trying to explain the toy maker to Donna. I think that's a great line. I also like that they call the toy maker, not the celestial toy maker, for those who aren't aware. And if you've watched Unleashed or any of the extra material, Russell has explained this, but there are 2 uses of the word celestial from the 60s. There were 2 sort of meanings for it. One being of the stars, which is the meaning I think that was kind of... has been assumed that it was these days, but the toy maker wore sort of Asian robes, and unfortunately that celestial could have also been a sort of term for the sort of that magic Asian trope that's an awful trope from the sort of 60s and 70s, the idea of the mystical person from the east sort of thing, and unfortunately could still be read as that. So what I thought was really clever about the script here, and credit to Russell, because I thought this was a great idea, he was just referred to as the toy maker. On the only time he got the word celestial got mentioned is, we could be celestial together or something like that, when he was directly referring to it's the moment the Doctor is trying to reason with the toy maker, and he's like, well, why don't you just take me and we'll go and play games forever, and you don't have to hurt any more humans, which is a really powerful moment and a great moment for that Doctor. And a big part of his, he's lost so many people and he's never processed it, and he's just struggling with every single loss because it's all just building, and it's like it's all very well done, and that all links in really nicely to his arc. But in that moment is the only moment he uses the word celestial, to my knowledge. And I noticed that very much on my second viewing. Otherwise, he was the toy maker the entire episode, which I thought was really good. Just to avoid that old trope.
the toy maker's response to that, and a lot of elements of the toy maker were brilliantly written, because the toy maker's response to that of why, the reason I come to Earth is because you play board games, you play these games, you've got games consoles, and then he goes and the mind games that you guys play, and I'm like, oh wow, they have what RTD has managed to do in the writing of the toy maker has both make him seem like this godly, out of rule threat of like, well, he's such a threat because he can literally do anything. The rules don't apply, and yet also then justified why he keeps coming, why he's gone to Earth in the first place, and why he's enjoying messing with humans. And I was like, oh wow, the fact that you've achieved both of those things, and that speech about games on Earth is really clever. And again, you just go, oh, fucking hell, 45 minutes dedicated just to that would have been really interesting.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. And I felt like that about every other scene in this episode. Because the Stookie family, right? Let's very briefly talk about the dolls, because I just want to compliment the episode for the sequence where the Doctor and Donna are in the sort of haunted house element in the toy maker's realm, so to speak, and they come across the Stookie dolls and the Stookie family. It's incredible. The puppeteering is incredible. They look creepy as hell. It's shot with like all the atmosphere in the world. It's performed brilliantly by Catherine Tate and David Tennant. Their reactions to it are great. The special effects are great because it's a good blend of CGI and practical. And it ends with the incredible, savage Donna just destroying the mum, and then doing a rhyme as she does it, and then kicking the head for good measure, and the baby's cowering, which is just so much fun, and a great Donna moment for this episode that is a little bit underplays Donna, I think. I don't think she gets enough to do in this episode, and I know why. It's the Doctor and the toy maker sort of facing off. I get that, and sometimes you've got to be confident enough to allow a character to be present, but not necessarily be the focus, and I don't think that's bad necessarily, but it is, I do think Donna has a really specific purpose in this episode, so to give her a moment like that in the middle of it is super fun. So, while we're complimenting, things that could have been full episodes, I just want to talk about that, because that's fucking incredible. Another thing that
and a really creepy idea.
Oh, so creepy.
And just a really creepy idea, yeah.
Yeah, so damn creepy. And as well, I want to talk very briefly about as well the moment where the Doctor breaks down, where he says, what do I say? What do I say? Take away my toys, my Sonic, the TARDIS, what am I? It's such an amazing moment, because for those who are new to the show, that will just be like a moment where that character is questioning themselves. And that's perfectly serviceable and plays into what's going on in this episode of him being tired. But to those of us who followed the 10th Doctor story, that's a far cry from Time Lord Victorious. To have gone from I'm basically a god and I do what I want because I'm the fucking Lord of Time, to you take away my sonic screwdriver, you take away my TARDIS, what the fuck am I? That's brilliant. That's
especially
such good
the difference between his last words with Regenerations, from I don't want to go, I've got so much more to do, to it's time, Alonzi. Yeah.
It's incredible. And it just really is, it's amazing how they've brought that character arc full circle. I really didn't think they were going to do that in a way that would be that satisfying. It was a real joy to sort of experience those moments. Have you got any other small notes before we move on to the by generation? Because I've got one or two more, but I feel like I've talked a lot. So
yes, I think they should have mentioned Yaz is a big one for me. I think you've done a good job of adding weight to Flux. I think give Yaz and 13 their just desserts as well. I think you can track it. I think the notion of even the notion of the 13th Doctor called them her fam, but she still didn't feel she could truly, really, actually pause and settle down. And 14 does it, and he does it with Donna Noble and her family. And I think when 15 is listing at the end, and he lists Sarah Jane and he lists River Song, I would have liked it if Yaz was in there. I would have liked, and we Yaz, we fell in love with Yaz and we couldn't stop and be with her. Or so, maybe it doesn't even need to be that much. Just name her. Just go River Song, Yaz. Like, I just think, you know, you've canalised and done a great job of adding to the weight of Flux, and actually I think Yaz is part of that trauma too. I think Yaz is part of the, you know, reason the Doctor is so exhausted and fed up is because, you know, 13 says to her, if it was going to be anyone, it would be you, and it can't be. And I think, you know, regardless of how that's not given the depth it should have been given in Chibnall's era, and it wasn't at all. I think actually, you know, you could have including her name in that bit would have maybe retrospectively given it some depth, like he did so beautifully with the Flux and the weight of the Flux on the Doctor and giving that Mavity. You know, I just think that it would have been good to do that with Yaz as well.
Fuck you. I agree though. 100% agree. That, I mean, considering Russell fixing the Flux and making the Flux actually have some weight, as with the Timeless Child stuff, the idea that like he might have also resolved the other dangling thread that Chibnall didn't have the skill or the inclination to solve in his era with Yaz would have been powerful, I think. So I'm fully in agreement with that. How did you feel about the Master stuff?
I do. Well, actually, can I just say my other one?
Sure.
Because I think actually this was something that was mentioned by Council of Geeks, and I'm definitely paraphrasing and sort of re-saying it. So I want to give them credit, but also I want to make it clear that they didn't say it quite like this in case I'm misrepresenting their view. So actually, it's a thought inspired by that. I just want to make that clear. I just want to keep that. I want to make that balance. So here's sort of me taking their thought and kind of actually feeling quite strongly about this. So Dan, we've had throughout the specials, we've had a lot of great representation and a lot of great points made. We've had things that have been controversial when they shouldn't have been, like Isaac Newton, and we've had things that were incredibly important, such as the pronoun scene in the Star Beast, a lot of the content with Rose in particular, and Russell T Davies has come out and said a lot of things, such as, you know, a firm stance on, if you include Destination Skaro as well, a firm stance on this is how we now see Davros. They are no longer, you know, a villainous wheelchair user, and a firm stance on it's important to have the scene where the character's dead name Rose, because that actually happens and we should face it square on. So, in a world where all of those points have been so firm and the importance of the representation that those scenes represent have been so firm and so, nope, we're doing this and it doesn't matter how people are going to react, but we are doing it. Why the fuck did the clothes have to change during the regeneration? Why couldn't 14 be stood there in Jodie's outfit? Because if memory serves, and I'm probably misquoting here, and I'm acknowledging that right away, but it was something along the lines of he knew that in all the papers would be the image of David in the Doctor's costume. Well, fucking let it be then, because there's nothing wrong with that. Fucking let that be the image. Let's have a Doctor that's to some degree cross-dressing because, you know, they're wearing clothes for the opposite gender, although they're not, because I would argue that 13's outfit was very gender neutral. I've probably misused the term cross-dressing there as well, but like in terms of what you could represent with that image, in terms of why has everything else been so strong, and yet the clothes had to change because we couldn't have David Tennant in Jodie's costume. Yeah, I don't understand that, and I'm bringing it up now because it didn't get explained. Like you yourself said a few times, you were hoping that was a bluff, and actually there would be an explanation for why the clothes changed, and there wasn't one, which suggests that, you know, it was what RTD said it was, and I just think actually we could have had that. And that would have been cool, and yeah, and I just don't understand. we've been so strong on other areas that could have, you know what I mean? Because Council of the Geeks also pointed out, and again, I don't want to misquote, and they are way more qualified to talk about this than us. They talked about how they felt the dead naming scene actually wasn't. They didn't like that because, and again, apologies if I'm misquoting, because they thought it was giving a awful subset of the audience an excuse to also dead name the character, and that was a negative thing. Now, personally, again, they're way more qualified to talk about it than I am, but I think that's thinking too much about the outside world, and kind of, that doesn't mean it necessarily wasn't right to do it in the show just because of a reaction it would get afterwards. But equally, the clothes thing is exactly the same argument as that in reverse. And you go, well, why did the clothes matter? So I wanted to make that point.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think it's weird because there's a certain amount of defiance in what Russell has been doing with these episodes. Like a lot of like just middle finger up to those people. Like, I literally don't care. Go on, complain, do it. Like, I do not care.
Mate, in the Giggle,
I will defy you.
In the Giggle, Donna basically looks to camera and says Boris Johnson was shit. Is essentially what happens.
Yeah. And so, it's weird to think that he was so conscious of it for the Power of the Doctor's regeneration scene. All I can assume now, knowing that it wasn't subterfuge, because I thought he was hiding an actual reason that the costume had changed, sort of thin excuse about the politics of it. I thought that made a lot of sense to me, because I also don't like that they didn't do that, and that they copped out of that, and that they were cowards when it came to David and Jodie's costume. But I think there's almost a weird rite of passage for a Doctor to be in a variant of the previous Doctor's costume. I didn't like that at all. Now I don't like it at all now, knowing that it wasn't anything other than just that's what his regeneration did. So looking back at it, I think it's a terrible choice, and I don't think the reasoning makes sense. And I think there should be. Well, it almost smacks of like Russell gained his confidence to be defiant after writing that moment. You know what I mean? Like he wrote his moment for the end of Power of the Doctor, copped out on the costume, and then when he actually sat down to like handle his era, he went, you know what? No, I'm gonna be bolder than that. And I guess, we have to give people room to grow into that stuff and gain that confidence and build that place. And I agree that it should have been that way, and that he shouldn't have been worried about the outside world at all, and he should have just let it be. But he's done so much good since then in terms of representation, including one of my favourite moments in this episode, which is the accessibility ramp for the TARDIS.
Yes, agreed.
If anyone doesn't know the backstory of that, he explains it in the commentary, which is a really beautiful thing. He talks about a fan wrote to him, or maybe it's in Unleashed. A fan wrote to him and said that they love Doctor Who, even though they'd never be able to get in the TARDIS themselves, because they were in a wheelchair, and that's why he included that scene. Because now that fan can imagine themselves being able to travel with the Doctor, and that's a young fan.
I haven't seen all of the commentary, so he might talk about it in there for sure. It's definitely Ruth in the 15-minute YouTube behind the scenes.
Right.
Ruth Mandalay, I think it is how you pronounce her surname. She who plays Shirley. She talks about that story and gets really emotional, and it's beautiful. She talks about RTD doing that. I also loved. Do you think? Sorry to interrupt, but it's related specifically to that. Do you think it's coincidence, or do you think Kate Lethbridge-Stewart being unfiltered with the spike, yelling, "I've seen you walk, I've seen you walk"? Do you think that was Russell very cleverly predicting that people would be saying that? Because obviously there's been this whole thing from, morons about, well, she crosses her legs. I've never seen a disabled person cross their legs. It's been a lot of the thing from them on the Star Beast, even though Ruth Mandalay has spina bifida and can can walk, but needs to, or can walk short distances, but needs to use a wheelchair. I don't know all the details about medical diagnosis. Apologies if I'm getting any of that wrong. But do you think that's just coincidence, or do you think Russell was predicting somewhat what the reaction could be and going, "Fuck it, I'm going to put the trolls in her mouth"? Like,
no, I think it was
brilliant.
more likely that he'd had conversations with Ruth, and maybe she'd experienced that, and the same way that Russell's not a trans person, but he knows dead naming is a thing that happens that's horrible. Maybe his experience talking with Ruth, and maybe it wasn't even Ruth, maybe it's another friend of his that happens to be in a wheelchair. I don't know, but I'm just saying that maybe it's an issue. I don't think he was preempting the haters of this specific show and this character. I think he was, like he was with the dead naming thing, exploring a real thing that people in wheelchairs have a problem with, where people do shout that sort of shit at them. That's what I think. So yeah, that's where I stand with that. But again, Russell's bravery since that choice, you have to just go, okay, you've either learned from that, and maybe now in hindsight he maybe regrets that choice. I don't know. He's not said that. Russell talks with an awful lot of confidence when Russell talks, so it's hard to, I don't think he'll ever really cop to that if that is how he feels now. But the way I'm looking at it as is that was a mistake, but then he got 20 things right in terms of representation in the 3 episodes, and I'm that score sheet's looking pretty healthy. Letting an own goal in isn't the end of the world. That's how I'm seeing it. While I agree with the concern and I feel frustration at how that was handled, not just from a nerdy fan perspective of like that's just how it's supposed to be. It's almost like a rite of passage for each Doctor to be in the previous Doctor's outfit for a little bit. Even if you take that out of it, I still think it's cowardly not to commit. But that's where we ended up. And again, he's done so many things right since then that I'm not gonna pull it apart. 2 last quick things, and then we'll get into Bi Generation very quickly. I loved the reference to the galvanic beam. For those who don't know, galvanic radiation is the kind of radiation that would kill you on the outside of the ship when they were traveling around in midnight. Galvanic radiation. The idea that somehow unit of weaponized galvanic radiation to make a galvanic beam is fun. I liked that. A scene I did not like. There's a moment when the Doctor says, "That's who you are, using your intelligence to be stupid, poisoning the world and hating each other. You've never needed any help with that." It all feels very out of place and outside of his character arc for this episode. It's a speech I would have removed personally from the episode. It felt really out of character for the Doctor. Thankfully, it's about 4 sentences and it's gone, but it is there. That's my last 2 notes. So then the only other thing I wanted to talk about, Chris, I just wanted your opinion on this particularly. The handling of the Master. So for those who don't remember or didn't or weren't paying attention or just want just a reminder, the toy maker references having battled the Master, won and trapped them in their gold tooth, and then at the end of the episode we get a really fun little wink and a nod. The gold tooth is retrieved, meaning that we've sort of laid the groundwork for a return for the Master at any point, basically, in the future. And we don't even need to specifically see that gold tooth be used again. We'll clarify, because I know some people were like, "Oh, isn't this just exactly what they did with the ring, from was it the ring? Whatever it was, the thing Lucy Saxon pulled out of the fire from back when they did the original John Sim Master storyline."
Yeah.
I honestly think it doesn't even matter now. If the Master reappears now, you just go, "Oh, they got out of the tooth."
To be honest with you, I because most people's interpretation is, someone's got the tooth with the Master in. I mean, my interpretation personally was that potentially was the Master, that they'd got out of the tooth and they were just picking up the tooth as sort of a reminder or a souvenir or but I seem to be alone in that. So
I had not thought of that at all.
But to be honest with you, I just assumed it was Jinx and they're playing the Master. I was just like, okay.
Fascinating. No, that hadn't occurred to me at all. No. Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, anyway. Do we like that idea? I don't mind the Master being sort of like a little joke in this episode rather than a big part of it. It's a bit like the that alien at unit. It's one of those things. It's such a small reference. It takes up so little time. It's not like a plot that requires more explanation. It's just one of those fun little world-building details that I'm just like, yep, fine. Throw in that sort of stuff all the time. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. And if anyone's like, well, is it Sacha Dhawan's master, and they then got stuck in the tooth? Is it this? Is that? Like, unfortunately, the master continuity and the clarity of which version of the master is which is already fucked. So I think it's more complicated to go back and try and explain it all. So them just being like, yeah, no, master's the master we're dealing with was in a tooth. I'm like, oh, fine.
Have you heard the theory about 14 becoming the master and it being David Tennant?
No, I haven't.
There's a really interesting fan theory that, because the master messed with the Doctor's regeneration to become the Doctor, that this bi-regeneration is actually a byproduct of... bi-generation is a byproduct of that, and that this Tennant 14 that's still left out and about in the world will slowly just become the master, and therefore Ncuti's master will be played by David Tennant.
Look, I think the master being played by a former Doctor is a really interesting and brilliant idea, but I think that would absolutely screw over the ending of this episode.
I agree. I'm not saying I like that idea. I'm just saying that's a theory that I've seen several times since this episode aired. It's a nice theory. Anyway, all right, let's tackle the big one. Let's do the big boy.
Can I just say I did see someone tweet and suggest that maybe it was Shirley picking up the tooth, and I was like, I don't think you've been paying attention to how Russell feels about wheelchair representation or disabled representation on television. I don't think he's going to do all that Davros stuff and then have Shirley pick up the tooth and become evil.
That's a really good point. Unless the notion was that Shirley picks up the tooth out of, scientific curiosity rather than evil plans, which is, also possible, I suppose. Although I don't feel like whoever picked up the tooth had red nail varnish on, like quite like deliberate. I don't feel like her character did.
No, I don't feel like
I don't recall. I need to go back and look.
Before we move on, just to give credit where credit's due, and actually because it's a really nice summary. So it was Mr. TARDIS who tweeted, imagine if Series 4 was just Partners in Crime, Midnight and Journey's End. That's your lot. I think that's what these episodes tried to do. As a result, we had these huge arcs, revelations, and more truncated to the extent that they were practically invisible.
Yeah.
Which I think is, a summary.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much how I felt about these episodes in the end. I don't think any of them are classics, but I did enjoy all of them. At different levels, but did enjoy all of them ultimately. All right, let's tackle the big boy. We're here. Let's do bi-generation. So, for those who do not know, bi-generation is basically Russell's excuse. He liked the idea, according to him, and according to the commentary and some of the stuff he said since. He really always wanted the idea of the Doctor because the Doctor never gets to meet their next self. It's always it's almost like a tragic thing. The Doctor sort of is dying, and this other person's taking over, but they'll never get to know who they are and what they're like. And he liked this idea of the Doctor getting to meet their next incarnation before moving on, and then getting a happy ending. Because regeneration is always tinged with an element of tragedy and sadness, and he liked the idea of doing something different with a regeneration. On paper, that's great. What happens in the episode is the Doctor is shot by the big laser thing, starts to regenerate, and then it goes a bit wrong, and sort of Ncuti's Doctor, the 15th, sort of separates out from the 14th to the point where they both exist in the same time and place. And then they team up to win the day. Then we get the ultimate payoff to the 14th Doctor's arc of, well, I'm going to go off. The 15th Doctor is like, I'm going to go off and have all the adventures. I think I've got the line here. I'm fine because you fix yourself. We're Time Lords. We're doing rehab out of order. And the premise is that the 14th Doctor does not continue on big adventures, but settles down, lives with the Noble Temple family, the Mott Noble Temple family, and basically, I think rehab is the wrong word, but like almost like therapy. Like, you know, he takes some time to process everything. And then at some point in the future, and the episode is not explicit about this, but the implication I got from that "I'm fine because you fixed yourself" line, because it's a timeline thing, is that at some point that 14th Doctor will, you know, pass away, become the 15th Doctor, and then immediately zip off to the moment we saw him split from the 14th in this episode. That's my interpretation of it. The problem, for me, was that the episode does not make that clear. And then it's further complicated by some jokey comments that Russell makes in the commentary, but we'll come back to that because that's a different issue, I think. And I do think he was partially joking with that, but we'll come back to that. So I have very mixed feelings on it, because I think the idea, like all the ideas in this episode, is brilliant. Top tier. Absolutely top tier. The Doctor getting to meet his next incarnation is such a fun notion. It gives a more positive spin on regeneration, which makes it feel different to any regeneration we've ever had, and all the other ones have all ended up feeling a little bit similar to each other. They've tried to mix it up in a couple, especially in the classic era. They mixed up the regenerations. One time it was forced by the Time Lords. With the Fourth Doctor, there was the whole thing with the Watcher. You know, but all the New Who regenerations have been very similar. The Doctor, injured, returns to the TARDIS, gives a speech, explodes, new Doctor says something weird, new adventure next week with new Doctor or whatever. So I'm all for all of this. I love that it concludes the New Who arc. I love that it gives the Doctor time to get over some of the issues that they've been experiencing. I'm on board with every single element of this idea. I'm just frustrated that he didn't close the actual physical practicalities of it by clarifying, by having Donna say, well, are the two of you forever now? What happens when you regenerate to 14? And having 14 respond with, well, I'll become him and then I'll be back here. You know, just to close that loop, clarify how it works. And I think that Russell actually, and I'm starting to notice a pattern with this, is often very vague, so he can adjust things later if he needs to. But I think that is to the detriment of this episode by quite some way. I think the lack of explanation for what bi-generation is and how it works will forever hurt this episode. Forever hurt this episode, because I think it will cause confusion and it will cause some people to delegitimize Ncuti's Doctor. Well, the real Doctor is Tennant and he's off living with Donna Noble. I foresee bad things. Now, it's possible that we will get more clarification in Ncuti's first season. I know that Russell said that so that nobody questions the legitimacy of Ncuti's TARDIS, there is something that happens in an episode in the next season to clarify this is the one, the original, the TARDIS. God knows what that is. But if he's going to the trouble of doing that for the TARDIS, for his own words, to stop people questioning the legitimacy of that TARDIS, I'm hoping he's had the same thought for the Doctor, because I'm already seeing those comments on Reddit. So that's my overall thoughts on bi-generation. I do need a pee, so I'm going to hand it over to Chris, because I'm very curious about what your thoughts are, because we haven't really talked in detail about this since it aired. How are you feeling about bi-generation? And I will listen to what you're saying while I run off to pee.
It's tricky, because them interacting was amazing, and Dan and I have, you know, had that conversation before. You and I, Dan and I don't know why I'm talking like that. You and I have had that conversation before and different ways to do it. The notion of one Doctor's first adventure being the other Doctor's final adventure. Like, it's a really great idea. It's a really interesting idea, and that element of it is fucking fabulous. Like, I've rewatched the last 20 minutes of this episode, the last 15 minutes, however long it is, twice since it aired. And it's got me so excited for Ncuti. So many moments of it are amazing. That I've got you and him kissing him on the head. Like, I love that. but it is messy, and it is complicated. Things like, I agree with Dan's interpretation, but then also part of me goes, well, like, what does that mean physically? Like, Tennant regenerates, but then disappears and reappears at this point as Shooty? Does that mean that Shooty has got 14's memories? My interpretation watching it is because also you go, well, is Shooty an off branch of is it timeline stuff, and Shooty has the growth of 14 even though he popped out at that moment? Because I could understand someone watching it and going, well, how's he had that growth? Because he's popped out here at this moment.
That point is clarified, because he has the line, I'm fine because you fix yourself.
Yeah, although I didn't, I must, and this is separate to the logics of, you peed really quickly, by the way, that was impressive. This is different to the rules of bi-generation. I personally didn't love that line, because Donna specifically references it as therapy, and I don't know. I think therapy is an ongoing thing, and the use of the words fix yourself in the context of a scene that also basically implies the Doctor is about to go away and have therapy. Fix yourself as a term jarred with me a little bit.
Sure,
maybe I'm over.
Yeah. But I mean, that is we can discuss that as well, because I do think there's some merit to that point, and I agree with you. Like, the idea is nice, but phrasing it that way is maybe a little clumsy, let's say. But in terms of your questions about how it works, and about whether 15 has 14's memories and character growth, that is confirmed. That's the one thing Russell did go to the trouble of actually putting a line in that confirms.
Yes,
that.
Yeah, but I just think then it becomes the logistics of that. It almost raises more questions of, okay, so he's coming out of that moment, but is it timelines? Has he gone back in time, etc.? Do you think it's cleaner, potentially?
I know exactly what you're about to say. Go on. I had the same thought. Go on.
If the toy maker's about to kill 14, and then another version of 14 comes out and stands in front of it and takes the bullet, basically, and then that version of 14 regenerates into Shooty, and then everything else plays out as it had.
Yeah. I thought about this. I thought there's two versions of this. There's one where another 14 shows up to save him, and while he's dying, he's the one that tells young new 14, the 14 we've been following, you're gonna get through it. You're gonna take some time, and you're gonna process, and it's gonna help you a lot. And then he becomes Shooty. That resolves a lot of issues for me with how this works, and it allows us to have the two Time Lords on screen, the new and the old. And it allows us to see the regeneration physically happen, because the other version I had thought of was, they end up playing catch. It's just Tennant. So it's just the Doctor and the toy maker, the Time Lord and the toy maker, and as it was phrased in the episode, and the ball, Tennant misses it, and a hand grabs it, and that hand is Shooty, and we reveal he's come back to help in this moment. And be that, but the problem with that is then you don't physically see the regeneration. So I like the idea, that we just discussed, of like another version of 14 showing up basically from the end of his life, taking that bullet, giving him that advice: you need to stop. Take it from me; it helps, and then passing into Shooty, and then having the two of them then take on the toy maker like that would be really good.
Imagine him being like aged up and just really fucking, because there are points in this where and it's the power of his performance in particular. When 14 talks about feeling exhausted, you really feel it. Like, David Tennant's doing a wonderful job with that. Yes, like, it's fantastic stuff. And the notion of this really kind of strong, like healthier 14 coming on and like taking that hit and then that happening. It's like I think interesting, and it just a lot cleaner, because there are just so many questions now of like what happens when 14 what in fact impact does it have on everything else, and some of those answers are even more confusing If you want us to segue into that, Dan?
Well, are we talking about, like, you talking about the TARDIS?
No, I'm talking about the notion that all the Doctors, there's timelines all over the place.
So,
now.
yeah, so Russell, I think he was sort of mildly joking, because I think they've done this before in commentaries where they've had, like, wild jokes about the ways they could shift the canon of the show. But Russell was like, he literally said, I'd like to think, which means it's not canon, it's just his idea of it right now before he's put pen to paper. He says something like, I like to think that this is sort of reverberated backwards and all of the Doctors have now been granted new life in their own TARDIS and the chance to zip off, basically, and continue their adventures. They were all granted that gift. And that way, if we ever see other Doctors in the future, they can be older, canonically speaking. He was saying it with a lot of laughter. I do think he kind of knew he was poking fans a bit with that one. I'm hoping that's not something he ever actually makes canon, because I think that is fucking awful as an idea. I think everything about that hurts the show. He literally, it's a true Doctorverse or something like that. I think he said, no, stop, bad Russell.
I think what's crazy about that is, one, the notion that if old Peter Davidson popped on screen or older Matt Smith popped on screen, the notion that you could get away with not even in that explanation having to go, oh, well, this is a reverberation of that time that you bi-generated is crazy. But also, we've been given two perfectly serviceable explanations for it in the past. One is the explanation explored in Twice Upon a Time and Time Crash, which is the Doctor going, because there's two of us, it's playing with the timelines, and your appearance is different. And the other is what Sylvester McCoy says in Tales of the TARDIS, which is there's timelines all over the place, and I'm from a timeline where my version of the Doctor lived longer. Like, it's slightly uncleaner, that one, because it implies that there are timelines that we aren't following.
It implies a multiverse, which I think we all are shitting ourselves at the idea of. Doctor Who is complicated enough without that. Thank you.
Yeah. But both of those explanations are cleaner than both of them could be said in one sentence, for example. It's a lot cleaner than this allowing you to pop in and, park David Tennant. And the thing is, you could still park David Tennant, even with what they've done, if you wanted to. But what makes me laugh about that is, I don't think in 10 years, say Tennant doesn't return at all, and in 10 years' time, Russell or whoever is in charge of the 70th goes, I want to use Tennant, and let's have it be that version of Tennant, right? The explanation within the episode required to do that would be just as much as if they'd used the meta crisis this time. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you wanted to create an excuse to use Tennant, you've created one. You've just done it again. Yeah. Okay, fine. Cool.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, the whole point of this, like, this idea of parking him so he can reappear later is dumb, because the whole premise of this is this Tennant Doctor, this 14th Doctor, he's taking a break. He's stopping, because that's how he's going to get better. That's what this episode completely established. If he runs off into any adventure now, then you're hurting that idea, in my opinion. Because I saw people going like, well, wait a minute, next time the Earth's in danger, why doesn't this Doctor show up and save the day? I'm like, because that's not the point. The whole reason he was finally able to hold his hands up and go, I can no longer I don't have to take responsibility for this now, is because he now knows there's another Doctor out there doing that. Ncuti literally tells him, you cannot save everyone. It's the first thing Ncuti tells him in that brilliant moment where he gives him a hug. Where he gives him the big hug. Yeah, it's a lovely moment. You would be completely undoing that if you then went and did stuff with that, I think, where you had Tennant do more things.
Because also, you could argue that about you could argue that about the Doctors at the moment. Why doesn't Matt Smith pop up and save him? Why doesn't Bill, who's basically like a intergalactic superhero, pop and save him? Why doesn't Clara save him? Like,
that was one thing about this episode that was really funny, was bringing up how many of the Doctor's companions have sort of died but not died.
Yeah.
in really kind of like odd ways. Like there's a real trend there of death but not death. And it's a really funny scene. It's a really powerful scene, and I loved the sequence where the toy maker forces the Doctor to relive the recent trauma, including the flux and the cutting of the things with all the marionettes. I thought that was a really powerful scene, but it had this really great comedic edge to it as well. When what is it he keeps saying? Oh, well, that's okay then. Like that interruption that the toy maker keeps doing. It's a great scene for 1,000 reasons, but it did really highlight that Doctor Who has a problem with the way it ends its companions.
Well, specifically, Doctor Who, or rather specifically, Stephen Moffat, because all three examples were Stephen Moffat's companions.
Right.
In terms
and
of
that is also what he did in Russell's era to River Song.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of the rest thing, I didn't love. I really loved the idea, and it made me, on paper, I really didn't like the notion of bi-generation, but the reason for it, the Doctor needs to rest, I thought was brilliant. But equally, what that means is I didn't love the lines about him nipping off and having adventures with, as much as I love the idea of him having adventures with Rose and Mel, and as much as I love that it's like, here you go, big finish. I'm sat there in that scene. I'm like, you're trying to have your cake and eat it now. You're trying to have this message of settle down with a family and rest, but you're also trying to go, he's still having some adventures. Don't worry about it. And I think that's a little bit messy. I think I don't think we needed those in the episodes. I think someone could think that if they wanted. Someone could go, he's got a TARDIS. He's probably nipping out in it. But I think it undermines the message slightly.
It depends, because I think it really depends on your view of how the Doctor travels. Because what our experience as viewers of the show, especially during Moffat's era, is every single place that TARDIS fucking lands, it takes him to danger, it takes him to adventure, it takes him to saving people and the world and the pressures and the trauma, right? But we also know that the TARDIS takes him where he wants to go. And this is fansplaining, completely fansplaining, but what the text of the episode tells us is that he did just pop off for a trip to Mars or whatever with Rose, or whatever the trip was about. They made it sound like holiday-type visits, and I kind of like the notion that the way the TARDIS knows where he needs to be and when, in many ways, and often looks after him in that sense, and takes him to where he needs to be to save people and do the right thing. I like to think it's smart enough to know this Doctor is resting and to take him to actually those places that he wants to go to where he is just visiting for fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is also, as well, what I like to think happens between journeys anyway, with every Doctor. The idea that anyone would want to travel with him if every single adventure was like this is mortifying, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, very quickly, just want to give a shout out to all the performances in this, because we haven't done that yet, but Neil Patrick Harris is obviously just a fucking tour de force throughout this entire episode, doing 1,000 things in 1,000 ways, and he's all singing and all dancing while delivering dialogue that's quite complicated, and a performance that's quite serious, and then he's menacing, but he's fun, and he's all those amazing things. Tennant obviously sells us on that tired Doctor. Donna has to sell us on convincing that Doctor to take a break and to do that, and she has this beautiful scene with him at the end. Everyone is doing exactly what they need to be doing. And I will say, obviously, they got around the Wilf situation as best they could. I don't really want to talk about that too much because I don't think there's much to say, but just to clarify, obviously, not the cleanest, way they shot around him in the first scene, and then the reference to him being off in the field, shooting stuff. Yeah, I get it. Not clean, but absolutely understandable in the circumstances. Better than the alternative, which is saying he somehow passed away during all this, which is a terrible... No, give him the happy ending. This is supposed to be the happy ending. Let's not tinge it with sadness. So all of that stuff's great. But very quickly, the accents. One of the most insane things I've ever heard anyone say ever in a behind-the-scenes thing was Russell talking about the inherent racism of the Toymaker and the efforts they went to remove those elements, including the sort of Asian garb and the use of the word celestial, to then add, but we did still want him to represent, we wanted to represent that racism somehow, so we made him do silly accents all episode. And then that got so much worse if you watch further in Unleashed, when Neil Patrick Harris reveals that the accent, so it didn't just say in a German accent, he phonetically spelled out every word in the way he wanted it pronounced in the script. I'm sorry, Russell, that's super fucked up. I don't know why you did that. I actually think he should have just done the British accent through the whole thing. That was by far the most menacing, and it was surprisingly convincing. Good work, Mr. Harris. What an insane choice! That I genuinely, my mouth fell open when that moment in Unleashed came up. What a bizarre thing to do!
Yeah, that's mad.
To remove the racism and then add it back. It's just fucking bananas. I can't get my head around it. I don't know why it happened. I don't understand how that was acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Even worse to discover it was physically written into the script. Gross. No. Bad Russell.
Yeah, I think just remove the racism. That feels
feels like the right answer, doesn't it? That feels like the right answer. Yeah.
Because also I'm so because obviously it's linked. This is worse, but it's linked in my head. And Dan and I discussed this yesterday. To the first Doctor having to be a little bit sexist in Twice Upon a Time, and it's like, guys, RTD, Stephen Moffat, most of the audience isn't remembering these things with the reverence that you are. Some might be, but that's these are the same people that are potentially going, oh, why isn't it 25-minute episodes and you know what I mean, like 6-part stories? Like, don't worry about it. You don't need to you don't need to represent that part of the Toymaker. You don't need to necessarily include that part of the First Doctor if it's not going to add anything to it. Like, and again, it's this boldness of some decisions and not like no matter how you feel about what's happened with the Davros situation, I would argue that, Davros's motivations and physical appearance and stuff, this isn't me saying I disagree with the decision that's been made, by the way, but, surely more people are going to remember what Davros looks like than are going to remember the Toymaker, a serial that doesn't even exist in a complete form, was a little bit racist. Like, do you know what I mean? So why are you keeping one thing and removing the other? Like, I don't understand the decision making there.
100% agree. Really bizarre.
And just to be very clear, I think that logic of I think the logic of Davros is very commendable. Like, that's not me criticising that. I think the cleanest way to do it is to just do stories set in that period. And again, Council of Geeks did a very eloquent video where they talked about how the response to that sort of thing should maybe be positive, or they felt positive representation is a better way of handling that. So actually, Shirley is a response to Davros and a better way of responding to Davros than potentially just changing it and whatever. But yeah, I don't understand why a pin is put in some things and then not others. And putting a pin in the racist element of the Toymaker, in my opinion, isn't a pin that needs to be there.
Yeah, and it's not even like with, I said this to you, like even at least with the David Bradley thing, they did it to go, that's bad. Whereas this is just there. Like at no point does Donna go, these accents are a bit offensive. And no one points it out.
Well, not even just the accents. In the first scene, he's outrightly racist. He questions where that guy was born. And
right.
The man has to be like, I was born in Chelsea.
And Russell's explanation was, oh dear, what's happening? My laptop's making noises, I'm sorry. And Russell's argument was like, oh, well, he's the bad guy, he can be racist. I'm like, yeah, but you've got to point that out. You can't let him do it unquestioningly. Someone has to challenge that, or it's, what are you doing? Yeah, bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Very quickly, Chris. Oh, go on. Did you have a point on that?
No. I was going to lead us to a potentially a final subject, but you do what you were going to say.
Well, I just wanted to bring. Well, this isn't to do with this episode because we did say we'd very quickly cover a point brought up about the Star Beast episode that I thought was really interesting. But let's deal with what was your last point before we do that quickly.
No. Let's do that, and then we'll end on we'll end on what I was going to say.
Okay. For God's sake, YouTube, you absolute piece of shit. Sorry, I've just gone onto YouTube to get the comment, and it's like an extra step to continue your session. Follow some brief verification steps. You absolute bellend.
Yeah.
Let me open this in something else. YouTube is shit. YouTube is absolutely comically bad. Here we go. Okay. Where's the comment in question? So I believe it was left on our review of... Oh, damn. Where is it? Oh, I hate YouTube so much. It's filtered it out because I've replied to it. Okay, here we go. So, so this is from listener Bianca, listener and friend of the podcast, and this is in relation to the Star Beast. And I just wanted very quickly your thoughts on this, Chris, because I thought this is very interesting. I'm surprised my main issue with this episode wasn't brought up in this podcast. I guess it's just me, but I found it infuriating how nonchalant the Doctor was in regards to keeping the alien stuff out of Donna's mind. Like, her entire family, including Wilf, were stepping on eggshells with regard to the topic and praying Donna misses the alien invasion from time to time, because they were explicitly told by the Doctor that if she remembers, she's dead. He worries about it for the first 5 minutes of the episode, but then we cut to the Doctor showing up at the Noble household. He's gallivanting his way up and down the corridor with a sonic screwdriver without a care in the world. Yeah, that's a really good fucking point.
Well, especially because, and obviously the why it doesn't happen can be explained as the meta crisis has been passed to Rose, which buys them more time. But yeah, absolutely, they're right about like, especially when, from the Doctor's perspective, potentially, let's not forget, her head's about to explode and knock out any masters that might be near, because that's the defense mechanism he put in her head.
Oh, I
the
forgot
notion
about that.
that it would just. Yeah, the notion that it would just implode. So
I genuinely completely forgot about that element. Yeah, that's makes it even worse then.
So there's, it maybe you could fansplain it and go, well, that's because Donna was very confused, whereas the Doctor felt that his presence was oddly calming to her, or maybe he sensed something had happened to make it. I don't know. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is a very good point. That's just very much ignored.
Yeah, it's madness, isn't it? I really don't have an answer. I mean, it is just something the episode ignores, and that is a flaw. But I do think it says something about how much fun that episode is, that you are willing to just go, fine, and go with it, like, and not really question it. Also, I do think that is part of it.
Could have been... Yeah. It could have been resolved with that scene where they're sat round talking, you know, him just looking at her, or maybe, you know, Sylvia pulls the Doctor aside and goes, I thought you said she'd die, and he goes, for some reason, the meta crisis is not having the impact it once did, and I don't know why. Like, just those two lines you then get, and then later on, you're like, oh, it's because the meta crisis has passed down. Like, they could have even written in, I think, just two lines to quickly sort of address it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
The final thing I wanted to say,
yes,
because I think it's potentially, unless there's any more to say, a good note to end on. Ncuti was fucking phenomenal. Like,
so good.
The best, like, for, and now obviously he's you know, it's the adrenaline of the episode ending and all of this sort of stuff. So he's you know, in terms of first Doctor moments, his is longer than anyone else's, and is very different to, you know, the opening 10 minutes of the first special or whatever that the Doctor's in. But oh, fucking hell. So excited for what comes next. The trailer he looked amazing in the trailer for the next episode. You know, the notion of just the bonkers brilliance of his first things to be playing catch with Neil Patrick Harris in his pants. Like, it's just fun. I loved all of that. I thought Ncuti was phenomenal, and so instantly the Doctor, and the chemistry between him and Ruby looks great in that trailer for the Christmas special. I just think, regardless of sort of the the messiness of some aspects of these 3 episodes, the job being to get the viewer excited for what comes next, and the job being to get the viewer invested in what comes next. Whew, I mean, big fat tick from me. I thought the 15th Doctor looks fantastic, and I thought Ncuti was absolutely brilliant. I mean, and let's not forget, you know what I mean? He is playing opposite the Doctor of this generation. New Who's Tom Baker, like the icon of many people's childhood in terms of the people watching this, and he went toe to toe, and just delivered such a confident performance. So yeah, I wanted to praise Ncuti Gatwa and say, how exciting is what comes next.
Yeah, 100% agree with all of that. He's delightful. Every moment, every choice was exciting and fascinating, and he had so much energy, and he brought something so unique to the role. I'm really looking forward to seeing how his performance develops. He really seemed to have a confidence to what he was doing, and he really seemed to know what he was doing and makes a really smart choices. So I'm super excited about it too. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, agreed.
There we go. The very last point, very quickly. This week they did a CGI background over a floor. Looked great. Unit headquarters looked amazing. And on the point from last week, after we finished the episode where I spent 10 minutes ripping apart whoever put that together, Doctor Who Unleashed did a bit where they sat down with the guy who put that corridor together from last week, and he seemed lovely, and he was really proud of his work, and I feel really bad about it. I stand by my criticism, but I do feel bad about it. So he seemed lovely.
The helipad was all CGI as well, and that looked phenomenal.
That's what I'm referring to. That's part of the unit HQ. That's basically a floor with a big green screen around it, and it was just lit better. I think they used natural lighting and it blended in way better than what they did last week.
Sorry, because you said HQ, I assumed there was some CGI I didn't know about in the control room, in the ops room.
Yeah, no, sorry, because obviously the helipad leads into the ops room. I kind of meant the whole. Yeah, apologies, I wasn't clear. But yeah, anyway, so that's everything. Obviously, the church on Ruby Road. At Christmas we'll probably cover that. This went on for way longer than we were hoping, but it was good fun to chat about Doctor Who. I hope you guys enjoyed it with us. Obviously, stick with us if you like this. Subscribe to the channel, all that jazz. Yeah, I had a good time watching these and talking about these, and hopefully you guys did too. Comments down below. But I think that's everything, Chris. So thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And that's been everything, finally, for this very, very long Who review. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.